Hello, I'm Dr. Harper. This video is in project management. It's a lecture video, an introduction and context to the project management course. So let's bring up the notes. So in project management, the introduction and context, the notes, I start with an overview of the material. The PMBOK is organized around 10 knowledge areas, 5 process groups, 49 process, and ITTO stands for inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. And Waisaki is the effective project management, the 8th edition, and it's organized around the 4 quadrants of the project landscape, life cycles, process groups, processes, and models. They're very, very similar, a little bit different. The PMBOK is more of a guide, and the effective project management is more of practical application. But together, they will satisfy this course. A summary of the material. On the PMBOK guide, I'll start with the PMBOK guide on the first 3 topics here. And the overview and context is what we're doing here today. And here I'm talking about definitions, the environment, the project manager. And then I get into qualitative traditional and then quantitative traditional. And here's where the quantitative techniques come in. And we'll talk about scheduling, cost analysis, quality control, risk analysis, and procurement. On the qualitative, it's integration, scope management, resource, human resources, communications, and stakeholder. But then we have, and also Waisaki, along those lines, have very similar parallels, but it's a little bit different. It's organized a little differently. So initially, I'll use the PMBOK organization, Project Management Body of Knowledge. And then I will allude to the Waisaki organization toward the end of the course when we get into topics 4 and 5, where we have the complex, agile, and extreme type models, which extends beyond the traditional, and then Waisaki with a hybrid, putting it all together. Okay, there's an overview of the material. Going a little bit deeper, into the material, which we'll cover a little bit today. We'll start today. The fundamentals of PMBOK in the 6th edition. Again, it's a guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK, the 6th edition. And it's made up of 10 knowledge areas, 5 process groups, which define or is a framework for 49 project management processes. So here is the 10 knowledge areas over here in this in the table. And up here are the 5 process groups. And here are the 49 processes in here. And notice how they align the processes within a group and within a knowledge area. The reason for that is just a structure, it's just a framework to keep track of where these processes are. Now, what's a process? Each one of these represent a process. For example, a knowledge area will have multiple processes, and you see here the integration knowledge area has 7 processes. The cost knowledge area has 4 processes. The quality knowledge area has 3 processes. So each will have different amounts of processes, but under each process there will be inputs, sometimes 1 or more. There'll be tools and techniques that this is what we'll pull out in this course. And then there'll be outputs, and that's the goal, that's the takeaways. And then down here, some of the takeaways or goals will be a charter, project plan, change control, scheduling, Gantt charts, communication plans, risk analysis. Here are some of the takeaways that we will focus on in this course. Okay, so there's an overview. Then we go into the first part of it with PMBOK, then Waisaki. Well, Waisaki has a little bit different approach. It's saying, here's PMBOK, but then here's how you would apply it to be effective. Hence, effective project management. And I could change effective to practical project management or efficient. He starts with, his approach includes something called a landscape, a project landscape, where the traditional projects in quadrant run, Q is a quadrant. Quadrant number 1 is the traditional projects, and basically that is very similar to the PMBOK. But then he extends that to a complex framework, and that's quadrants 2, which is agile. Quadrant 3 is extreme, and quadrant 4 is something he calls emergency. And we'll talk about this in the latter part of the course. So the traditional project landscape will be quadrant 1, and those will be extended into a complex project landscape, quadrants 2, 3, and 4. But then when he starts putting all these together, they're not separate, they're not independent. He develops them independently, but then he begins to combine them, which is very practical and effective. And there's where he comes to the hybrid project management or the framework. The effective complex project management or the hybrid project management model or the framework. In this framework, you have the idea station. What will we do? How are we going to do it? And then how well did we do it? And knows the feedback system. So it's not necessarily a process. He describes it very well in his textbook. It's a framework. It's a framework within your processes can be effective. And it's very practical. It's very well done. That's why I picked the textbook. Okay, to break it out a little bit more, he defines life cycle models. Well, he has different project types from the quadrants: traditional (TPM), agile models, and extreme project models. Well, the types of models that he introduces and explains would be linear and incremental for the traditional, iterative and adaptive for the agile, extreme and emergency for the extreme. And this is what we will focus in on in the latter part of the course. Once we have the traditional down, the qualitative and the quantitative tools and techniques. And then we apply them within these models, within the types, within the framework, within the structure. So he also has something called the traditional, agile, and extreme models here. You have scope, plan, launch. Monitor and control is a process within traditional and PMBOK, but sometimes he replaces monitor and control with execute. And that's the agile part. And notice there's a feedback. There's not a traditional feedback. There's not a feedback in the traditional models, but there is a feedback in the agile, and there's a feedback in the extreme. But notice the feedback here is to the plan part, the feedback here is to the scope part, and there's where the differences are. And that's much more practical, especially today. Okay, now let's get into the material. Now the project management introduction and context. This is an overview. The project management can be described by the art and science of transforming an idea into a product or service. What is a project? A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product or service. What is project management? Project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities that fulfills the project scope on time, within budget, in order to meet or exceed stakeholder needs and expectations. Now, each one of these, the description and a project and project management, down below, we will expand on that to get a good feel for what that means and what it doesn't mean. But then we go deeper. Then we go into the organizational structure. We talk about a project versus a program versus a portfolio and the project management office. And then the resources. Different types of stakeholders: sponsor, project manager, which is a key stakeholder, team members, and vendors. And then finally, the PMBOK has cycles, phases, process groups, knowledge areas, ITTO, input, tools, techniques, outputs. Well, each one of these have a very specific definition, and we'll cover that. Now, this project management checklist we will cover in here today, and this was my checklist because almost every project needs this under the definition of a project. This is kind of like a summary of what a project needs as you go forward, whether it's formal, whether it's informal. This checklist needs to be there some way, somehow. Now, project management extensions. Well, we will do agile in this course, extreme in this course, But what we will not do is certain type of complex project management projects, international, sustainable, virtual projects. This goes beyond this course. I'm laying a foundation, but I mention it here because for the projects, some people may want to go in those directions and do research in those areas. And that's why there's a project. And the types of projects, well, we can have event project management, which is really popular today. Construction project management, again, is pretty much everywhere. If you're in business, you'll be around construction project management, renovation, building, construction somehow, somewhere. Information technology, this is really two types. One is software development, one's hardware development, to oversimplify it. Software development project management projects are very, very different than producing a product or producing hardware. Software development is very different. Systems engineering, project management, well, systems engineering is a different approach where you look at different systems. Urban planning, project management, and global supply chain project management, and the list goes on and on and on. And so you've probably seen projects in the military, projects in government, projects in universities, projects in sports. They're everywhere. But what is a project? Well, let's ask that. Okay, the project definitions. Now let's go through these and expand on them. The art and science of transforming an idea into a product or service. There's 3 words in here that are very important. First of all, the idea. Now, operations, you're taking inputs and producing outputs, but you know what those outputs are. But a project is you have an idea. If you have an idea, how can you make an output, a deliverable from that idea? And the idea could be a product, a service, or both. Or it could be or something even other than that. But the key is idea. Well, ideas are easy. You can come up with a lot of ideas. It's not easy, but you can come up with a lot of ideas. Some are good, some are bad. But you can have all these ideas, but the key is who in your organization can take an idea and make it happen. That's project management. And that's why it's so important today. The other 2 words is art and science. Well, there is a science to it. And we'll be looking at the mathematical part, the quantitative part, even the qualitative part. There is a science to it. But that science doesn't define success in a project. It's also an art, which means the more you do it, the better you get at it. And you have to do it more and more and more in order to do it well. So also in art, one project management manager may do it differently than another one. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. And so you need someone who understands project management, doing project management, as a project manager and also as team members. Because the team members have to understand what the project manager is doing and understand that that's their decision, then they understand what they're doing to make it work. So the knowledge of project management is not just reserved for a project manager, it's reserved for business and success within the entire project. Okay, origination of ideas. So let's take this idea and expand on the idea. Idea can come from a lot of different places and for a lot of different reasons. Here's 3 reasons: a need, opportunity, or directive. Okay, well, if it's needed, that's a very different project than if it's an opportunity. And depending on the type of project or the origination of the idea for the project will be handled, designed, and implemented very, very differently. For example, a need. You use your resources as needed. Okay, if you need to do it, just as needed. You have to do it. It's a need, so only as needed. Use the most reliable solutions because there's a need here. You have to get this done. I mean, it's a need, so you use your most reliable solutions to achieve that need. Because if you don't achieve it, it's critical. and achieve the goal in a minimum time. And so you make sure, since it's needed, make sure the time then aspect becomes very important. And notice you're using your reliable resources, and timing is important. So timing takes the precedence over cost or resources because it's needed. What about opportunity? Use your resources if available. Use innovative solutions because it's an opportunity. You're trying to learn from this opportunity. So maybe not reliable resources because it's a need, but innovative solutions because it's a learning process. And then achieve the best goal possible. So timing is not that critical, but achieving something and along the way learning as much as you can about the opportunity to achieve a goal and also learn how to achieve that goal. Directive. Well, a directive is something you have to do. It's not really needed. You have to do it. So you use minimum resources, the most direct solution. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Just get it done. Don't question it. Achieve goal just meet requirements. It's a directive, and so if it needs to be met, meet it. Meet it as quickly, as efficiently as possible. Okay, and here's 3. I'm sure there's a lot more, but you get the idea. So when those projects come at you, you don't want to use one of these approaches to the wrong idea, the wrong source. In other words, you don't want to use all of your resources for a directive. It's a waste. Okay? And you don't want to use just the minimum resources for a need because you may fail, or an opportunity because you may not learn anything. You may achieve the project, but it wasn't that successful. So be aware of how you approach a project. Okay, next, what is a project? A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product or service. There's 2 words here. The first one is temporary. This is a key difference between a project and operations. A project is temporary, a start, stop, you're done. Operations is continual. You grow, 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 grow. As an example, the first part of last century, Henry Ford created Ford Motor Company. It was an operation, an assembly line. And they're still making Fords, and they keep growing and growing, scaling. But also in the 30s, they built Hoover Dam. That was a project. Hoover Dam was built, it's finished, it's done, it's maintained, but you don't keep building Hoover Dam. It's a project, it's done, move on. Okay, the second word is unique. And this takes a little bit of explanation. A project has a characteristic of being unique. It's something special because when you approach this project, it's something that you're expecting something that you haven't seen before or you're not expecting. Okay, like construction. You're building a house. You've done this a million times before. You talk to a construction manager. Is every project unique? Absolutely. Because we know what we're doing. The goal is not unique, but the solution to that goal will be unique because we'll never know what we encounter. The timing is a problem, the weather is a problem, but we have to get it done. So the timing creates the project, but then the process then becomes as unique, whether it's the goal is unique or the solution and the process is unique. So prepare to be flexible because it's going to be unique. You say, I've done this before. Well, in a project, that's a very dangerous perspective to have because you may fail. In some cases, that's why in some industries, over 80-90% of projects fail because people don't approach projects the right way. So let's delve into this a little bit. The difference between projects and ongoing operations, well, we have time, temporary over here, ongoing over here. Uniqueness, this is unique, this is not unique, it's the same thing growing. And then the objective. Well, the objective here is to satisfy project objectives. The objective of ongoing operation is to support a business model. So these 3 things are very key in defining a project versus ongoing operations. Why is this important to distinguish? Yeah, again, if you consider ongoing operations as a project, then your company will start, stop, and it's going to go bankrupt or fail because you haven't really designed a scaling or an exit strategy or a strategy to move forward in your operations from a project into launching a business. But if you use ongoing operations to project, you'll delay, and you won't get it done on time. It'll be over budget, past the deadline, and your resources are tied up from other projects. And that probably sounds familiar because it's very common. A lot of people approach projects as an operation, as an ongoing operation, and they never achieve their goals. Okay, for example, projects versus operations. A project is short-term, fixed time, and success then is dependent on satisfying the project. Ongoing operations is long-term, it's continual, and the objectives on time is going to be resilient. You continue, you scale, you continue, you scale. Uniqueness. Well, the deliverable is going to be the focus of the project, and the process is going to be unique for that specific deliverable. Your stakeholders can change each time, and the challenges can change, and the timing, your resources, your assets can vary. In ongoing operations, your output is going to be a family of products or services that are still there. You can improve, but it's the still family of product and or services because that defines your core competency. As far as processes, you have a continual improvement. You keep getting better and better and better. The timeliness of a project, you're not allowed to do that, but you can in ongoing operations. And you have your business goals, and growth is an objective. Down here, you're stakeholder focused. Success is stakeholder focused. Success in ongoing operations is business focused. So whatever your stakeholders want, that'll define success in a it'll define success. But the business focus then is going to be growth of your business. Okay. Have some examples down here. The logistics for the next monthly board meeting versus the logistics for a week retreat in the mountains for the executive board. Well, since it's a monthly recurring, this would be operations, and this would be more of a project. Replace the light bulbs in the conference room versus install new lighting in the conference room. Well, replacing light bulbs is ongoing operations. You're going to keep doing that. New lighting in the conference room, that's going to be more of a project. Ensuring successful upgrade of software on all computers. Develop new software for inclusion in next product offering. Well, this is an upgrade. So we're assuming if this is the first time, maybe it's a project. But if it's an upgrade that's done routinely every year, every 2 years, if it's a huge upgrade, it could be a project. But often it's just another set of operations that has to be done every upgrade, every software release. But developing your software, that's more of a project because once you've developed that software, you have a deliverable. Okay, and then finally evaluate international vendor performance. That's ongoing. Conduct international vendor search. That's one time. Feasibility. Another aspect of a project is the feasibility of a project. Now, it may be a project, but should your company be doing it? Create a summit, conference on critical issues to your company of all industry leaders, including your competitors. Wow, that sounds pretty aggressive. That would be a project, but should you do it? Can you do it? Do you have the resources to do it? Do you have the ability to do it? So sometimes within a company, people will say, let's do this project, and it fails. Why does it fail? Because it's not feasible. It's not achievable. Well, that doesn't mean sometimes you shouldn't try. But be aware and be practical. Do you want to use your resources to something or do something other that's parallel or similar or less aggressive? Design and install conference room with leading edge lighting technology. Okay, let's do that. And someone says, wait a minute, what leading edge lighting technology? What does that mean? I don't know. Let's something that's better than what we have. Does it exist? I don't know. Well, are you starting a project that doesn't exist? Okay, this might sound crazy, but in business, people do this all the time, especially top-down projects. Develop artificial intelligence software to learn from users the best way to do their job, and then implement learned behavior. Again, that's very, very aggressive. It's a good project. But what's the feasibility of that project? Well, the feasibility, let's say we could do it. But then if we can do it, what are the implications of doing that? Is this project going to create other types of problems down the road? And we see a lot of problems today with in artificial intelligence encroaching in other people's affairs. How much of this should we do? Can we do? And so we have to be really careful about the feasibility and how far we would go with a project. Expand global influence of supply chain to effective political stability in host countries. That is a very aggressive and laudable type of project. But can that be done? Is it possible? So this may not be a project as much as a mandate or a vision. Okay, and so a project is something that starts and stops. You've achieved it. You have a deliverable. Will this deliverable ever be met? Political stability in host countries. Well, maybe temporarily, maybe not. The point is it defined as a project? Now, it may be a vision. It may have projects around it toward that objective or strategy, but itself wouldn't be classified as a project because it starts, stops. You've achieved political stability in all your host countries. Okay, that's not going to happen. Well, that's probably not going to happen. Okay, so let's go on. Now, what is project management? Well, project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities that fulfills the project scope on time within budget in order to meet or exceed stakeholder needs and expectations. So let's break this down. First of all, project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. Well, this is the integration characteristic of project management. Where do you find that? In PMBOK. In PMBOK, we'll have knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. So there's the integration characteristic of project management. To project activities that fulfills the project scope on time within budget. Now, here's a new word, activities. Now, usually a project has multiple activities. It's not one, it's multiple activities. And so you apply this expertise to the different activities in order to achieve a scope on time within budget. So here is where you have flexibility. The flexibility says you have scope, time, and budget. Traditionally, this is called the triple constraint. Scope is what you're doing. Time is how long it takes you to do it. It's dependent on getting it done on time. Within budget, you have a limited budget. But those three are constraints. And the triple constraint, historically, has been how you would approach the flexibility aspect of a project. I can't do that much in that much time. Well, give me more money. Or let's do less. Let's do less with the amount of money we have, and let's extend the time. So you balance these three out to achieve success. Finally, in order to meet or exceed stakeholder needs and expectations, here's where all the way through from the planning stages to the execution stage to the closing stage of a project, all the way through, you have to maintain a focus on success, and the focus on success is focusing on the stakeholder needs and expectations. And there's where the project manager has to be a leader and say, our focus is on stakeholder needs and expectations. But it'd be good to do this. It would be great to do this. but that's not what the stakeholder needs. That's not what the stakeholder expects. We meet or exceed the stakeholder needs and expectations. If you don't meet or exceed those, it's failed. Even though it may be a good idea. It may be a great result deliverable for another project, but not this project. Okay, so success requires focus on stakeholder needs and expectations. And we'll talk about the different stakeholders today. Now, this little separating this statement out, I put it in a graph. Over here's the integration, PM, BANA, knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. Here's the flexibility, triple constraint, scope, time, and cost. And here's the focus over here, success, the stakeholder needs and expectations. Now, this is PM BANA. Now, Wysocki introduces something broader, something called the scope triangle. Instead of the triple constraint, it's a triangle, and he puts more in there. Instead of scope, time, and cost, the scope is in the middle, time is over here, cost is over here, and resource and availability, quality encompasses all three of these. And on the outside, you always consider the risk. So Wysocki expands it. Whether you have the triple constraint initially or Wysocki's triangle constraint, scope triangle, it's a very good way to approach management, project management. Okay, key project management terms. The project management checklist here. You initiate the project, define the project, expect change and plan for change. Again, I said this is my list. And so let's go through this briefly. First of all, the charter. As we will see on the qualitative traditional, a charter, one of the primary aspects of a charter is to initiate the project. It's an idea. You have a lot of ideas. How do you know idea becomes a project? Well, the charter is where, boom, this idea now is no longer an idea, it becomes a project. And now you start allocating money, allocating funds, allocating effort, and you're going to create a timeline and achieve success. Project scope statement. Now, the scope statement defines the project. Okay, this is what the project is. It defines everything about the project, but it defines it. It doesn't necessarily describe it in detail. It defines it. Now, the integrated change control, you should always expect change and plan for change because change will always happen because of the uniqueness of a project. Stakeholder analysis, the stakeholders are so key that every project must consider the stakeholders. Define who the stakeholders are, communicate with them, and get validation from them for success. And finally, the scope statement defines the project. The project management plan has the details of managing it. Planning, execute, control, and closing the project. The project management plan will have all of the details. So PM BANA has a traditional project management of a scope, plan, launch, monitor, control, close. But then Wysocki takes this life cycle and expands on it. Okay, traditional, he says, well, there's two models. There's linear and incremental. But then agile, he takes traditional and agile. He says, well, let's expand this to scope, plan, launch, monitor, control, close, next close. There's where you have your iterations. Agile will have iterative and adaptive. And finally, extreme is going to be feedback to the scope. It's a little bit off here. Oh, don't want to do that. Okay. This should be the plan, and this should be the scope. There we go. And this is next. There we go. That's what it should be. So the agile here under the complex landscape from next goes back to plan. The extreme here goes back to scope, and then finally you close out the project. So you can close an iteration or you can close a cycle. But anyway, so Wysocki expands it. And we'll look at that in this course. Now, the different life cycles. Now, there's something called a project life cycle, a project, and also a product life cycle. And they're two different things. and make sure you keep those separate, because a project life cycle has a start and a stop. They initiate it, they plan it, execute, close it, monitor, and close it. And it's done. You're done. Okay, so the activities usually starts activity level here, starts here, and during the execution, monitoring, and controlling, this is where most of the effort occurs, and then it decreases. But you have the same type of life cycle for a product, but it's a little bit different. For example, stages of a product could be introduction, and this could be the research and development. And then once you launch it or introduce it, the introduction could be growth. So now the growth here begins to grow. But if it grows and it continues on, then you have to have a scaling, and then it becomes mature. And the maturing here, then it levels off, and we see mature industries and mature products today. But then after a while, it gets outdated. You're going to have other new entrants into the area, and then it begins declining. Okay, so that's a product life cycle. And notice this could be very long term. In some cases, it doesn't really go down to zero. It just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. A lot of people say, like what? Like a pencil. We still buy pencils. This was such a long, actually the design is very similar to the introduction, I think back in the over 100 years ago. Okay, so some products stick around, okay, and then go away. We have other products, but they're still wooden pencils. Okay, but the project life cycle, you can have multiple project life cycles within a product life cycle. So keep those separate. Okay, then organization. Well, the organization within which a project resides is extremely important to know how to conduct a project. And so when you come into an organization and you're a project manager, make sure you know the organizational structure, the different frameworks, the different frames within that structure, to know how you're going to conduct projects and how to be successful. Okay, and this is an overview. It's not exactly the same for every organization, but usually you have an executive management, and underneath that you'll have administration, you'll have functional line management, and then project management. Okay, as an example of a project management structure, the PMO, or the Project Management Office, underneath this you'll have a number of things where the Project Management Office will manage. First, it could be a project down here, and the project usually has a deliverable, timeline, start, stop, done, deliverable. And often the project is focused on one specific deliverable. But a number of projects can be part of a program, where the program could be a larger type of deliverable. Like a Boeing 747, and you'll have a number of projects that are part of that program. But different programs within an organization will comprise something called a portfolio. And the portfolio then will have more of a business focus and business value to it, and also business strategy. But all of this will be managed by the Project Management Office, the project, the program, and even the portfolio. And so a lot of organizations do not have a PMO, Project Management Office, or Project Support Office. It's called all different things. And what this does is support the project aspects of an organization. Organizations that do have these support mechanisms and engage them, and the people down here are well aware on how to use them, they're successful. They're 99% successful. Okay, so let's break this up a little bit. Okay, different type of organizational structure. First of all, you have a functional organizational chart where the functions or line items up here are line managers. They have staff under them. Notice nowhere in here is there a project manager. So where's the project manager? Well, it could be one of these line managers or functional managers, or it could be a staff member. But wherever the project manager is, the structure of the organization does not allow authority to that project manager as much as it does a line manager. If there's a conflict, the line manager has the authority within that structure. But then let's go to the other end, a project organizational structure where we have project managers. So instead of line managers up here, we have project managers. Well, under a project manager, you'll have team members for the project, but you'll also have staff members. So where are the human resource management, finance management, marketing? Where are all the disciplines? Well, they're going to be embedded in the team members, and sometimes it's the staff or administration. Well, the idea here is maintain quality control of your technical ability. Well, down here, you're going to have maximum to achieve your project objectives and scope. But down here, you're going to have redundancy. You might have team members that are redundant. One team member could satisfy more than one project. Okay, up here, you may not achieve the project relative to what the stakeholders really desire. So there's give and take. Well, to satisfy this, there's something called a matrix organizational chart. And the matrix chart combines the line managers up here with the project managers over here. And so essentially there are two managers and you have staff members in the middle. And so there's two bosses. The project managers making sure that the projects are satisfied on time, within budget, within scope. The line managers are making sure that the tactical expertise is done correctly. Okay, and so this looks like cumbersome, a lot more management. The staff member in here is going to have two bosses, the line manager and the project manager. And you think, well, is this going to work? It worked quite well. I was in an organization that went from a line to a project to a matrix. But when they rolled out the matrix here, they made sure that the line managers and the project managers knew quite well how to organize. So they had a lot of support at those levels. And then they had a lot of seminars and education on how we work between these two. Now, if it's a technical issue, you go here. If it's a project issue, you go here. And these people will coordinate. But how do you ensure coordination? Well, let's back up. The PMO, making sure they coordinate. The project management office, the support office will coordinate both of those together. Okay, to emphasize that, let's look at organizational charts, a matrix organizational chart. Well, you have authority on the line, you have authority on the project side, and how this authority is shared really defines the type of matrix organization you have. For example, if it's heavier on the line and weaker on the project, it's called a weak. If it's heavier on the project and it's weaker on the line, it's called a strong. But if it's balanced, then it's called a balanced matrix organization, and that's the most efficient. Okay, and so the project management authority, the low is on functional and weak matrix. The high is a project and strong matrix. And so within the matrix here, the weak is where the functional has more authority than the manager's projects. And the high is where the a strong matrix is where the project has more authority than the line managers and the functional managers. Okay, but you want to balance it. You need to balance it so that it's a balanced organization. Okay. Now, what about the PMO? Well, PMBOK calls it a project management office. Waisake calls it a project support office. Actually, it's been called a lot of different things, and it can be called anything. But this pretty much describes the same thing. So look at the description. Description, whatever you call it, says a project management office is a management structure that standardizes the project-related governance processes and facilitates the sharing of resources, methodologies, tools, and techniques. A project support office is a temporary or permanent organizational unit. And notice a management structure, organizational unit, same thing, that provides a portfolio of services to support project teams that are responsible for a project portfolio of projects. And notice facilitate sharing of resources, support the teams. So first of all, it is a business unit, organizational unit, structural unit, and it's a support function. It supports to help. And notice the support and facilitate issue aspect of it. The actual definition of a PMO or a PSO is not governance. Governance is not in here. It's support. Support. The governance is in the organizational structure. The PMO or the project management office or support office is support. Now, on the functional, it could be up here and support the CEO. It could support the line managers. It could support the staff. Okay, you could have different types of PSOs. Down here on the project office, same thing. Support administration at the top. Support the project managers to make sure they're, for example, a good example of a project management support for a PSO for project managers is paperwork. And some people refer to that as a non-value added in the value stream. So the PSO would support and help to do that as quickly as possible. Because if you have a project to do a lot of paperwork, if that's a project, it's a directive. Get it done. PSO will help do that quickly with minimal resources. Or a PSO and the staff members here to make sure they know how to report things or monitor things. Stakeholders are very important to a project. But it's important to know what a stakeholder is. A stakeholder is anyone or anything that is involved in, has interest in, or stands to gain or lose from a project. So that's a very broad definition. Stakeholder importance. Well, the stakeholder is important. The stakeholders, all of them are important because the stakeholders will support the definition of the project expectations because the stakeholder expectations essentially are the project expectations. But they will facilitate project execution and control because all the way through the project, the stakeholders are part of the execution and control of that project. And finally, a stakeholder will validate the project success. So before, during, and after, stakeholders are extremely important. Well, what does this mean? Like, what would be a stakeholder, anyone or anything? Well, anyone could be a sponsor, project manager, team member. A thing could be a vendor, a company. Could be customers or a customer base. It could be a community. It could be an environment, etc. It could be a lot of different things. Okay, so each one of these will have to be considered, some more than others, in a project. Now, a key stakeholder is a project manager. Okay, and the guide and also the Wysocki goes into a lot of detail in the project manager because they're important. First of all, the project manager is responsible for all aspects of the project, and I want to say that project manager is the key stakeholder. Because the project manager is part of the design and planning at the beginning, internal management, and coordination during a project, external communication, and representation during and after a project. So the design it and plan it up front, the coordination and management internally during, and the communication and representation. So all three of these are key to manage, and there's where the project manager is a key stakeholder within any project. Well, what types of knowledge, skills, and characteristics are needed? Well, under project management knowledge, one thing I want to mention is the project management knowledge versus domain knowledge. What do I mean by domain knowledge? Suppose you have an engineering project. Well, the domain knowledge would be knowledge of engineering. Do you have to know engineering to be a good engineering project manager? And the answer is no. because you can have an excellent knowledge of engineering. You have no knowledge of project management, and you're going to fail because you don't know how to run a project. But if you have a very good knowledge of project management and you're good at it, then you know you do not have domain knowledge. And part of the project management knowledge is bringing people into your on board who knows, and a communication plan who will provide the domain knowledge when needed, because the project manager organizes all that. What about skills? Well, I have the left-hand skills and the right-hand skills, and I'm not going to say left brain, right brain, but I just did. Communication skills, organization skills, problem-solving skills, okay? That has to do with internal skills. They have ability to communicate well. They can organize well. They can solve problems well. Usually it comes from the actual project manager. It's internal skills. External skills, they can negotiate well. They can communicate but negotiate by understanding the other person. Leadership skills is getting people to follow. Team building skills, getting people together as a team. Okay, finally, characteristics, your personality and experience. These have a balance. Now, the personality is just something everyone has. The experience is something everyone gains. So the personality, you already have that. The experience, you're going to gain that. Both of those have to complement one another. The experience has to complement the personality. And the personality has to engage the experience. They have to complement one another. If the personality does not really use the experience well, they're not really going to learn. Because that personality, and every person is different. And there's the art aspect of project management, because the project manager is the key stakeholder, because the personalities are different. So as you experience something, don't say, oh, I want to be that, if it's not your personality. Understand who you are and be true to your personality, and let that experience support your personality, because there's where the art comes in to a project management. To be a good project manager, got to be an artist. And being an artist is being true to your personality and yourself. I use the word personality is probably a better word. I'm sure someone in psychology or philosophy can come up with a better word. But as I describe this, hopefully you can understand what I mean. Because I'm not coming from those disciplines. I'm coming from practical experience. Okay, let's go on. Okay, finally, at the end here, getting ready to launch, looking at the material. The PMBOK guide is organized over cycles, product life cycle, project life cycle. Phases just means timing. And you have a project life cycle phase where you have concept, development, implementation, closeout. You can have a project time phase. So phases are just timing. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. It can be sequential, one after the other. It can be overlapping. It can be iterative, but it's time dependent. And product life cycle phases, design, prototype, final assembly, that goes back to the product. Okay. Then you have process groups, and we'll look at these a lot more beginning in the next topic. Initiating is you need to start the project. Planning is determine your plans. Executing is launching it. Monitoring and controlling, this has to do with doing the changes that are needed. Closing a process, closing is very important, and we'll talk about that. And then here's your knowledge areas. Each one of these have processes, tools and techniques, inputs and outputs. Okay. Here's the PMBOK 6th edition. Okay, now we're getting into this course, what we're getting ready to do here. These are the knowledge areas. There's 10 knowledge areas, and there they are. Now this comes out of PMBOK, which is a guide. Okay. Now under each of these, you're going to have these processes. Okay, and to actually become certified through PMI, and by the way, the PMBOK guide came from the Project Management Institute. The Project Management Institute. and the PMI Project Management Institute award certifications. Well, you have to take exams on these areas. Well, this is kind of daunting. There's a lot of information here. There's actually 49 different processes, and each processes can have multiple tools and techniques, okay? So there's a lot of material here, but they organize it. They organize it into different processes and process groups. And as I said before, there are 5 process groups: initiating, and then planning and executing and closing. But monitoring and controlling is kind of like from the beginning to the end. Okay, and that's why monitoring and controlling here. Planning, there's a lot in planning, and executing is just getting it started. Monitoring and controlling, noted it's represented by every knowledge area, because monitoring and controlling, you do it from the beginning to the end to make sure you control it, to make sure it stays on track. Well, down here is major takeaways, and this is what we're going to start doing here coming up, beginning the next topic in this course. Okay, as an example here, I mentioned the knowledge areas will be broken out like this. As an example, the project cost management, as you'll see in the PMBOK guide, they'll have 4 processes: plan cost management, estimate cost, determine budget, and control cost. These are processes within the project cost management knowledge area. So this is a knowledge area, and these are processes within that knowledge area. Okay, well, under each one of these, there's ITTOs: inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. And for the plan cost management process, I pulled it out. This is what the PMBOK guide says. It says, okay, here are the inputs, here are the tools and techniques, and here are the outputs. Well, the output is just a cost management plan. But notice the inputs. You'll see this a lot in this course. Enterprise environmental factors, that's outside factors that are important to your project. Organizational process assets, that's internal resources that are important for your process. Now, the external, those can change. Be aware of the external environmental factors. The internal assets will grow. You will contribute to them, and sometimes an output of some of these will be contributing to the organizational process assets. You'll learn how to do things more. Again, it's an art. Okay, and so as you grow and as you build, you'll do that. Let's back up here. Pretty much on each one of these processes in here will develop more and more organizational assets, because you'll learn more and more and more how to do things. So you do have continual improvement, but not within a project. You have continual improvement between the projects. And there's where the program comes in, the portfolio, and a project is, and program portfolio is part of a business, where the business has continual improvement. Okay. Let's see here. And that's really all I have in this first lecture for the introduction and context. This is just a foundation. I didn't cover everything, but I covered things I think were important, and also things that will help us get started with the different, with PMBOK, and also with the effective project management. That's all I have for today. I hope this helps. And between now and the next time I see you, I want to urge everyone to take care and be careful.